In the last session, we pretty much saw how do we set up a job, and if you have to give something as a task to run, how is that you will give, and how will you tie it up to a particular node, and in that node, where exactly it is going to run. So that is what we were seeing. So now let's see a couple of other options that we have in the job. Okay, so that way now let's take a job. So here, when you create a job, what are the things that we have to give? We have to tell on what the job has to do, and then when the job has to be triggered, and then where it has to run. So in that, suppose if now I do not say when I have to run the job, then whenever you want, you can do a on-demand basis on which you will trigger the job. So to do that, you will click on build now, and it will automatically run the job at that particular point of time. Correct? So this is what we saw until last class. So now let us see another option where instead of running the job on demand basis, what if I want to run the job scheduled it, which means now I want to tell to Jenkins as this is the time on which you want to run, and automatically Jenkins will be trying to run it. So this is where Jenkins will be used as a replacement for cron server. Okay, so how do you set that? So if you want to configure a job, you go to the job and click on configure, and in this, if you go to the build trigger, there is an option called build periodically. Now if you click this, you will get an option. Now this option, what you see here, is exactly the same way how we can give a schedule for a job to run in a Linux machine. So if you have a job or a task which you want to run, for example, every 30 minutes, then in the Linux, you will use the cron utility, and for that you will specify. So in the same concept and the same syntax, what we are going to do now is we will tell when this particular job has to be run automatically by Jenkins. So here if I say every 30 minutes, then the job will be run every 30 minutes automatically by Jenkins. So that is the purpose of saying it as build periodically. That means you schedule a time, and based on that, automatically Jenkins will run it. Okay, so in order to give a schedule, we need 5 values. Okay, suppose if I say that I want to run a job every 30 minutes, then you won't just say only the minutes, because when you say a time, there are 5 values together is what you define a time. So now if you have to say what is the time, you will have to say what is the hour, what is the minute, and then you have to say on which month it is, and which day of the month, and pretty much which day of the week. So combining all this together is what we will be calling it as a schedule. So if you're defining a time to a particular job on when it has to run, then it needs 5 values. That is the minute on which you have to run, the corresponding hour on which it has to run, and then the day of the month. Day of the month means we have days. How many days do we have in a month? 31 days. That is 30 to 31 depending on the month. So that is what we have to say. Then which month of the year? So basically the value of the month ranges from January to December, and that we represent using the numbers 1 to 12. And then which day of the week, whether it is a weekday or a weekend, that is from Sunday to Monday, pretty much what day of the week you want to run. So that you will be specifying, and in that the day of the week you will specify using the number either 0 or 7, where the range happens between 0 to 6. So 0 represents Sunday and 6 represents Saturday. So like this, when you are giving a value, you have to give a combination of all the 5 values together, and only then we will be defining when it has to run. So when you're giving these 5 values, you have to give a space between them and give the values what you're going to use for it. Okay, so let us try to see how we will set up the values. Once again, the minute value ranges from 0 to 59, whereas hour ranges on a 24-hour format. So that is when after 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock will be represented by 13, that is in the noon. So it goes on until 23, where 23 is the time for 11 p.m. And then the day of the month ranges from 1 to 31, and the month ranges in the number between 1 to 12, and the day of the week ranges from 0 to 6. Okay, so these are the separate values that you want to give. So let us assume that I want to run this job exactly at 8:30. So then what I have to do, first I have to give the minute. So the minute at which you want to run is 8:30, that is 30 minutes. So you will give 30 here. So now once you have given a value, as soon as you give a space, then it is going to consider the next column as its value for hour. So anything that you give after space will be considered as the next column or the value for hour. So now, as I said, I want to run it at 8 o'clock, but pretty much it is 8 p.m. for us. So if you try to correspondingly change it in 24 hours, that's going to be 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So it is going to be 20th hour of the day and 30 minutes past 20th hour. Okay, so this will specify the hour on which you want to run. Next thing, if you have given the third value, you have to say is day of the month. So I want to run it today. So what is the day today? It is today 12th. So you will say the day of the month as 12. Okay, then once you have given the day of the month on which you want to run, the next thing is which 12th are you interested to run, because now we know that in a year we have 12 months, and pretty much in all of them you have 12 days. So which month of the year do you want to basically run this? So that is when we are interested to run it now. So now, in the sense, this month is June, so you are going to represent it as 6. So what this means is, on June 12th, 8 o'clock in the evening past 30 minutes, exactly you run it. Okay, and then finally, which day of the week you want to run. Suppose if I want to run it today, then today is Monday, so which I'll represent using 1. So what it will do is, only when it is June 12th, which is on a Monday, and exactly at 8:30 on Monday when it is June 12th, it will be running this job. Okay, so like this you can specify when exactly you want to run. But we are not going to use Jenkins or a cron entry like this to run only once. We want to run it multiple times. So that is when we might be having a requirement to have more than one value. Okay, so that way, now let's say I don't want to run it only on June, but I also wanted everything from June, July, August. So that way, if you want to give more than one value for that particular column, you will use comma. So if I say like this, what it means is, on June 12th or on July 12th or on August 12th, when it is Monday and the day is 12th and the time is 8:30, exactly you run. So that is how you will give more than one value for the same column. And you note I have not given any space, because as soon as you give a space, it will try to take it as a second value, and we can have only 5 values, not beyond it. So that's how we have to give comma separated value here. Okay, so comma separated represents that we are going to call this on multiple values. Now let's say, instead of multiple values, I want to run this particular job on June between 12th to 25th. Now let's say that I want to run this job from 12th to 25th. That way I can give multiple values here. So for that I can give like this, but it is going to be a longer time that you have to keep typing in, right? So that's when there is the other way of specifying multiple value is through range. So if you have a range of values that you want to pass, in my case I want to run it between 12th and 25th every day. So simply you give a hyphen and the value. So this will take it as a range. And once again note, there is a space only after this. So this represents that this is the value that you're giving for the third column. So what is the third column? Day of the month. So now if on the June or July or August between 12th and 25th, whenever it is a Monday, exactly on 20, that is 8 o'clock in the evening, 30 past minute of that, it will try to run this job. So that is how you can specify a range or multiple values by comma. Okay, but there is one more scenario where I don't want, regardless of whether it is Monday or whatever day, I want to run it on all the days of the week. It doesn't matter whether it is Monday, Sunday, Tuesday, whatever it is. So that way, now you can use a star where a star represents matching all the values. So that is how, what is the last value? Day of the week. And star represents, regardless of whether what day of the week is, if it is a June, July, August, between 12th to 25th, exactly at 8 o'clock past 30 minutes, it will be running it. So that is how you can match all the values. Now, same thing, if I say I want to match it for all the month, I don't want to run only on June, July, August, but I want to run on all the months, then you can also give a star here. So this means every day of the week, every month of the year, between 12th and 25th, exactly at 8 o'clock past 30 minutes, keep running it. Okay, so even if I give a star here, what it means, every month, every day, exactly at 8 o'clock 30 minutes, keep running it. Now if I give a star here, it means every month, every day, every hour, exactly at 30th minute, you run this job. That is what it means. Now let's take a example where I want to run this job every 2 minutes. How can I do? Now all the star will be there, but every 2 minutes it is going to run. Now I cannot give a range because I want every 2 minutes. So if I give a range between 2 to 60, it will run on second minute and third minute and fourth minute and 50 minute. Every minute it is going to run. But what I want is every 2 minutes. So that way, instead of this, I can say 2 comma 4 comma 6. I can keep giving this way, but again it's going to be a long list of value. So that is when there is another way of specifying the option is divisible. So this way you are trying to check the module or divisible. So star represents every value. So what is the first value? Minute. That is from 0 to 59. So for every value of the minute, if it is divisible by 2, then you consider. That way only the even set of numbers will be taken, or automatically only every 2 minutes it will be running. Okay, and then even if I give a star here, then it represents every month, every day, every hour, and every minute keep running. So simply it means run it every 1 minute. Okay, so let's see how it works. Okay, so automatically if you keep waiting for the next minute, it will automatically trigger this. So probably around 8:23 15 second it should be triggering it. That is the 7th build. So let's wait for some time and it is automatically going to trigger it. So if you see now, exactly at 1 minute it triggered. So if you wait for some more time, and the next minute it is going to trigger. So that is how, based on the schedule what you have given, it is automatically going to keep running based on that schedule. And in that, it will connect to a particular machine which you have defined, and in that, whatever the details, the task that you have given, it will be trying to run. Okay. Yeah, if you just say 2, what do you mean by that? The first column that you are saying is minute. So 2 means only if the minute is 2, you are going to run. So when will be the minute 2? So every time when the starting of the hour, when the minute is 2, only then it will run, not everywhere. But in order for running it every 2 minutes, that is when we have to say star divided by 2, so that every value divisible by 2 will be taking it. If not, it just means that on the second minute, every hour, on the second minute you have to run. That's the difference. So here you can see that automatically it is running the job every 1 minute. So you can see the difference. 8:23 it ran, and then 8:24. Pretty much if you wait for some more time, exactly 8:25, around some 15 seconds, it will trigger one more. So this is how you can specify a job to automatically run it over a period of time. Getting it? So, okay, Karna could just join. Just to give an overview. So if you want to give a schedule, you have to give 5 values separated by space, that is minute, hour, day of the month, and the day of the week. So with respect to that, we will be specifying what you want to run. Okay, clear? I'll just try to remove it because it keeps running every 1 minute. Okay, so where exactly the build triggers is the section which we'll be using to define when exactly the job should be running. So in addition to this, we can always run this job on a demand basis. How? By just clicking on this particular build now, and it will trigger. If not, if you have scheduled the job, it will automatically be running on the time that you have given. Okay, so now if you see what happens in the Jenkins is, each and every job that you are running and every time you are running, it will keep a history of everything. That is the advantage on why we use Jenkins in addition to this cron server replacement. But if you have, let's say, hundreds of job like this, and each one of them is running almost every 30 minutes, then you will be having too much of log to be stored. And in production, you will not be just having 4 or 5 lines. The output, whatever that you will have, will be huge set of files. So that is how whatever Jenkins is going to show you here, basically it is storing everything. So that is when, for performance improvement, it's always better to delete all the older logs that we don't need. Okay, so we can tell to Jenkins that keep only a particular latest build output or the latest time that you ran that job, and all the other ones can be deleted automatically. So to do that, if you go to the general section, and in this you can see an option called discard old builds. So if you click on this, there are 2 ways you can delete. The first one is whether do you want to delete the build with respect to a day. Now build means what? The job that you have run. That is what internally it calls as build. So if you remember in the last session I said Jenkins was basically created for continuous integration, but later on it was made more useful to all generic purpose. So that way everything that it refers is generally it calls it as build only. So build here represents that the time that you ran the job or the execution of one run of the job. So that way, do you want to keep the builds based on the day? So suppose if I say the build day is 2, then if you have ran this job and if that output is beyond 2 days older, then it will get automatically deleted. So like this, today if I run 10 jobs, from the time I have run, it will keep it for 2 days, and beyond 2 days, it will be deleting it automatically. So that is when you will keep the options of build only when you have the number of times that you are running the build is very less. Like if I'm running it twice a day or thrice a day, so I can keep it for 2 3 days, so that for 2 3 days hardly you will be getting 6 to 8 times of the log. But there are certain jobs which you want to run every half an hour or every 15 minutes or 10 minutes, 3 minutes. So in that case, the execution is going to be higher. So that is when, if you have more number of jobs that you're running, then you can choose another option called maximum number of build. So instead of saying the day, I can say how many number of job output that you want to keep, and beyond that you can delete everything. Suppose if I say 5 jobs here, or 4 jobs, at any point of time, Jenkins will maintain only the latest 4 output or the 4 times that you have run this job. And beyond it, it will be automatically deleting everything. Okay. So let's see that. So now we have 9, but what I have said is 4. So pretty much when you run one more build now, you will get the 10th build. As soon as you get the 10th, the 4 latest build history, that is 10, 9, 8, 7 will be kept, and all the previous one will be deleted. You can see now if I do a build once again, 11th will come, but the 7th one will go off. If you refresh, so you can see like this, you can pretty much tell Jenkins to store the history of only the latest based on how many number of jobs that you want to keep, I mean the number of history that you want to keep, or based on the days how long it has been. So it depends on the frequency of using. If it is more number of times that you are running, then go with the second option of giving the number of build to keep. The same thing, if it is going to run once in a while, then you can keep it with number of days. Okay, so this is how we try to maintain the job history and delete all the other ones. Getting it? Is that clear, guys? Okay. So what did we do? Now we saw how to schedule and how to pretty much make sure that the history is deleted. If you look at this, the example what I did was, I'm just running something called hello students, correct? And where it will run, it will try to connect to any one of the machine inside your group, and whatever is available, it is going to run there, correct? Now here, let's say you want to run something where it is going to take some value from the user and run, because as of now, if I click build now, whatever that you have given in this, it is going to be executed directly. But let's have a scenario where we need to pass a value and Jenkins should read it and then execute based on that. Now the example that you can consider here is, instead of printing students, it should ask a name for us, and whatever the name that we give, it should print that. So that is when, similar to this, there might be many scenarios in your production where you want to take a value from user and based on that you want to run. One example is, if you recall the Maven that we were doing, for running a Maven project, you want to give a goal, which is the lifecycle phase. Now, rather than hard coding, we can make it optional where whatever the goal which the user wants, he can pass it while running it, and based on that Jenkins will take and then it will pass the value to the command, and that command will be running. So that is how, on a need basis, if I want, we should be able to pass some value, and based on that, Jenkins should be taking the value from us and then run. So here, as of now, if I click build now, it is going directly, but we have to put a value in such a way that when I click this, it should take the value from the user by giving an option and then take that value and run execute the command accordingly. So for such a kind of requirement, then we have an option called this build is parameterized. Parameterized means you are supposed to pass some value to the Jenkins. Okay, so click on this option and then it will show you an option for adding what kind of parameter that you want to use. So there are a lot of parameters that is available, but let's take a couple of them and see. So the first value that you have is called as a string parameter. Now, regardless of what value that you are going to give, if you want to directly store as a string is nothing but a combination, right? So we will be using this. So this is one of the common and most popular type of parameter that we will be passing, because it will take any kind of value that you want to pass. Okay, so if you click on string parameter, then it is going to give you the option on what is the parameter that you want to take from the user and what is the value that you want to store. So quickly, let's say I will give a name for it. Okay, now let's say the name of the variable itself is my name. This is the parameter that I'm taking. Okay, and I'll give a description, enter your name. Okay, and let's just quickly give apply. And now if you come back and refresh, you can watch there will be no more build now, and instead of build now, it is saying build with parameters. That is because this job requires a parameter that we have to pass, that is my name, and only when it takes that value it will be proceeding further. So if you click on this, you can see until now it was directly going and executing, but now it is showing us with this details on please enter your name. That is the details what you have given, and this is the name of the variable. So whatever value that you give, practically it will be taken here, and then based on that it will execute. Sometimes the user doesn't know what value to give, then it will be a problem. So that is when you can pre-fill the box with some default value, so that you can specify here. So if no value is given, then by default you should take this value. So if I come and refresh this, you can see if I click, it is going to give, but by default it is filling a value. So now if I want, I can remove and I can give some value, or I can choose the default one. Okay, so that's how you can create a parameter and give the value. Now let's try to build with this value. So you can see it is executing, and if you go at the output here, what is the requirement is set? We should be able to pass from the Jenkins, where a user, if he wants, he will give a value, and that Jenkins should be taking and running, correct? But this is not yet happened. The first part is what we did. How did we do? We were able to pass values to the Jenkins, but Jenkins has not used a value, correct? So the second half of the requirement what we have is, after passing, how is that you are going to use the value within Jenkins? That is what is important to understand. So to understand this, what you need to know is when you run the job and give some value, it will be connecting to the machine, right? Whatever machine that you have given here, it will be connecting, and in that it is going to use the environment, and in the environment there will be a lot of environment variables it is going to create. So what Jenkins is going to do for that execution of the run of the job, it will create an environment variable with the name called my name, and inside that it will store the value. So now it is just like how you are going to retrieve an environment variable, you can retrieve the value from this. So it is quite simple. So how do I get a value from an environment variable? How? You will say on Windows percentage, the variable name and percentage, right? So if you say this, whatever the value stored in it will be replaced. Whereas in my case, we know that this is the variable what we have passed it as a parameter. So whatever values that I'm passing here will be available on this variable, and it will be available until this job execution has been completed. Okay, so now if you try to do the same thing, where I will just take the default and say build now, you have got a new output, and if you look at it, you can see that it clearly says that the value that whatever we have passed has been taken. Getting it? So it is basically whatever values that you pass as a parameter will be stored as a environment variable, and that will be available until you complete that particular execution of a job. So that is how we can make use of giving option for the user to pass a value as well as store it as an environment variable and then use it wherever you want. Based on it, Jenkins will be running the task. Okay. Now, this is one type of parameter, right? Suppose if I want, I can choose more than one parameters also. Now let's take, I'll call this as first name. So the name of the variable is fname, and I'll keep the default value as this. Suppose if you have a requirement where you don't want to just ask the user to enter a value, but you want to give him a choice to choose multiple values, or if he wants to choose a value based on what you give, then there is one more parameter called as choice parameter. So here, let's say s name represents second name, and whatever values that you want to give, you can put it up here. So let's say the second value that I want to put like this. Okay, and now if you apply and you refresh this, so instead of one value, you can see now it is asking us two values, where this is the second parameter which has choice parameter. So because of which you can keep as many values that you want into it, and the user can choose only among this value. Okay, so whatever that you store will be stored under this variable name. Same way, whatever that you choose here will be stored under this variable name. So now if you want to use it within your script, simply say percentage of that variable name. So I can say like this, percentage s name. So this means it is just going to print hello, my first name and the last name based on what values that I give. Okay, now for this, if I want to change, I can change whatever value, and if I give now, correspondingly Jenkins is going to take the value and execute it. Getting it? On what is a parameter and the types of parameters. Either you can have it as a normal string parameter, or if you want to have more than one value, then you can pass it as a choice parameter. Getting it? Nagesh, Karnakar. Karnakar, is it clear?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I'm not able to chat, but yeah.
So we saw how to schedule a job. We also saw how is that we can run the job periodically, as well as we also saw how is that we can pass a parameter to the job and run. Okay. Now coming to other point, with setting up all those things, let's try to set up a continuous integration as a job. Okay, by using all those things, now we will try to set up a continuous integration. So before getting into it, let's quickly try to understand and recall what is continuous integration. So what is continuous integration? Continuous integration is nothing but a process where as soon as a developer checks in, immediately you have to take the change, integrate and do the build. Correct? So for that, what is that the first thing we need? We need to have a repository. In our case, let's take a Git repository. And in this, now we need to check whether there is a new commit happening or not. Correct? So first let's try to do that one by one. Now I need a repository, correct? So let's go to GitHub, where I have already stored a repository. So that's what I said in the previous class. Start using GitHub and store all your projects there. So here, if you can see, there's a project called demo, and this is nothing but a Maven project. So now I can use this repository, and if I do a git clone, I will get the entire repository as well as the directory structure in which I can go ahead and run the Maven. Okay, so now the question that we have is, we need to check for this and tell specifically whenever there is a new commit happening. Okay, so how would I know that there is a new commit happening? For which we need to frequently poll from the Jenkins to this particular repository, correct? So that is how we will have a repository, and for that we will have to keep polling. Polling means you connect to that particular repository from the Jenkins and check whether there is a new commit happening or not. So that way, first for the Jenkins, we have to tell on what is the repository that it has to work, and then you need to tell how frequently that it has to connect. Okay, so that is when the first thing that you will say is frequency of polling. Okay, so let us try to do that. So first, let me take the path of this. So this is the path to access this. So let's go here, create a new job. So I'll call it as CI, okay, or I can just pretty much call it as a CI job. And now I'm going to use once again a freestyle project. So quickly, let's fill in all the other mandatory that we need. So first, I will set the discard build, and I'll say keep only 2 build outputs, okay, and then where I should run. So I'll give the test group. So it should pick any one of the machines in this test group. Fine. And then after this, the next session that you have is secure and source code management. So in this, you have to choose what is the tool to which you want Jenkins to connect, and based on that, give the value. So in our case, it is Git. So if you choose this, it is going to give you this option. And in that, the first option is to give the URL of your repository. That is this. So we have to give this repository's location where Jenkins will automatically connect and see whether there is a new commit happening. So that way you will give the URL to which repository that it wants to connect. And then since I'm using GitHub, pretty much we have a username and password given for that. Okay, so that way when Jenkins is also trying to connect to this particular repository, you need to specify as which user ID or password. For that, if you go here and click add Jenkins, it will give you the option. So here you can say what is the username and password, and if you store, then that will be appearing here like this. So you can choose different passwords that you have stored, and from them whatever is suitable, if you tell that, Jenkins will take that as the username and password to connect. So here I have this username and password. So every time now Jenkins wants to connect to this particular repository, it will use this username and password and then connect. Okay, so the first thing what we have given is, we have given the details about the repository. So that is done. And okay, further, one more thing I left. Now in the Git repository, we now also have one more concept called branching, because whatever you are going to store in a repository is not directly in the repository, but you have a branch, and in that branch is what we store. So that way, by default, we are going to work on master, so we are giving it as master. In case if you want to poll for some specific branch in this repository, then you will give that. If not, you can use the master by default. Okay, so once you have set to which repository it has to connect and what is the username and password, the next thing you have to tell is how or what is the frequency of when Jenkins should be connecting to this. Okay, so once again, when you say frequency, it is all about giving a schedule. So once you have given, then if it finds a commit ID, what it will do, it will go ahead and do some build step or some task. That is what we want to do. So when you come back to build triggers, now for connecting frequently to a particular repository that you have given in this, and to just check only whether there is a new commit happening or not, I will just give the poll SEM. We will not use build periodically. For this, we will use poll SEM. Why? What is the difference? Now, if you look at the requirement, let's say every 5 minutes, that is the frequency. So every 5 minutes, Jenkins should connect to this repository and check whether new commit has happened. And only if it has happened, it should proceed and do some build step. Suppose if there is no new commit or check-in, then it should not do anything following it. It should just keep polling, and only if it is a new commit that it found, it should proceed further. So that way, what will happen is, if you just give build periodically, then the build step where you will give in this. So no matter what is happening, if you say 5 minutes here, every 5 minutes it will just connect to the tool, and after that whatever that you have given, it will be running. So whether there is a change or not, it will not consider it, because build periodically means every 5 minutes whatever that you have given, it is going to run. So that is when we do not want to just check and blindly run everything, but we want to poll the repository for new commits, and only when you have a new commit, it should proceed further. That is why we use poll SEM, because this will do only the task of connecting Jenkins to the Git repository, and in that, if it is finding new commit, then it will go here for the next step. Okay, so I'll give poll SEM, and in this, now for our testing purpose, I'll just give 1 minute, because if you give more time, then it'll take a longer duration to complete. So that's why I'll just simply give 1 minute. So every 1 minute, this particular Jenkins job, it will connect to this particular Git repository and keep checking if there is a new build obtained or not. That means new commit has happened or not. Okay, so suppose if there is a commit happening, now I will just give a simple message here where I'll say echo found new commit. Okay, so clear with this? I haven't gone with the complete continuous integration, but what is the process? We are checking with the repository, and frequency is how frequently you want to connect to that, and check if there is a new commit happening or not. If new commit is found, then you go ahead and do whatever that I have given here. In case if it is not, don't even think about running it. Just keep checking every 1 minute to the repository. Getting it? Okay, now we have set the process, but let's quickly come here, and now when Jenkins connects to this particular repository, it has to know whether new commit has happened or not, correct? So as of now, if you look, this is the commit ID that this repository has. Okay, so at any point of time, just by looking at this commit ID, how can I say that there is a new commit ID that is coming to it? You getting my point? Now Jenkins will connect every 1 minute and it will come here, but how will it know that this is the latest commit ID? Same thing. Now let's say I am working on Git. I have a workspace with me, and now if I want to know what is the latest commit ID available, I will do a git pull. So what do you mean by git pull? You are updating your current workspace. So only with your current workspace, it can tell that there are new changes available in the central repository, and that you have to take. Correct? So that way, in order to know whether new commit ID is coming or not, we also should have a workspace, and only if you compare between that, you can say that, okay, in the central repository, now I see there is a new commit ID happened because the last time that we had our workspace was the latest one. So that is how we need to compare it with our workspace and then tell whether there is a new commit ID obtained. So that way, what Jenkins will do is, when you run this job for the first time, it doesn't know anything, right? So automatically it will create a clone of this workspace, and then from the next time when you run the command where it has to connect to this particular repository, every 1 minute it will try to check with the workspace what it has created and your central repository. So if there is a new commit ID with respect to that, then it will proceed with the actual build. Okay, so that is how Jenkins will also create a workspace for tracking and to know whether new commit is happening or not. Okay, so now as soon as I save this, Jenkins will start running after the next 1 minute, and in that first time it doesn't know whether there is a new commit or happening, but for that it needs to first create the workspace. So for the first time, automatically it will create a workspace and clone of this, and then from the next time it will try to check, and only if there is a new commit it will proceed. If not, it will not come to this step at all. Okay, so let's apply this, and the output of the git polling you can check here. So as of now it says that it has not done any polling, but exactly at a minute it will try to connect, and for that minute, since you do not have anything, it will try to run. So you can see now it has connected for the first time, and here it says that since there is no existing build information, that is the Jenkins workspace, that it has the information on the repository, so it is saying that it is going to go ahead with the build. So this is for the first time. So now what Jenkins is doing, you can see Jenkins is trying to do a clone of your workspace. Okay, so this is how from the next minute it is going to check with this workspace where it has cloned, and with the central repository, is there a new check-in happening or not. Getting it? Is that clear? Okay, so be clear until this. So now Jenkins, for the first time, it needs a workspace, so it created it automatically, and from the next time, if you see, you can clearly see that it is saying the last time you ran the build, the commit ID, that is the first time that you ran, the commit ID that you had is this, and as of now this is the same commit ID that you have in the central repository. So when it is comparing, there is no difference, hence there is no new changes found, and it is not doing any build. So next, exactly at 8:59, at 8 seconds, it will once again poll, and at that time only if there is a new commit ID beyond it, it will do that step. So you see here, you can see it is not even triggering it. So like this, every 1 minute it will try to run and execute the step whatever that you have given. Okay. Now, coming to the other half of continuous integration. So this is the first thing that we have done. Now, the next thing that we have to do is set up the actual build. So we need to do the build of our project, because when a developer does a commit, you will be getting the new change that you have to take and do the build. So for doing the build, we have this, correct? So how is that you are going to do the build for this commit ID? Let's say this is the new commit ID that you got. How is that you are going to do the build for this? Are we going to once again create a new workspace? We can do it, but if you recall here, sometime back I said Jenkins has created one workspace, correct? And that is where it is trying to compare. So where exactly is this workspace available? Once again, the basic comes in the picture. So where did I run this job? If I run this job, it used a machine under the group called test group, and in that it has used a machine called server 02. So if you are trying to run any job on a particular machine, where does it run? It goes to that machine, and in that machine it will go to the remote root directory and run everything, correct? Recall on the first session. So that way, now when it has created the workspace or the clone of the workspace, even that will be available under the remote root directory only. Okay, so now if you go to the remote root directory of this, that is in my case, I have set up my own machine. So if I go to that, C Vespa and Jenkins, this was the directory, correct? The working directory under this workspace, and in that you can see that it has created a folder with the name of the job, and if you further go inside, you can see this is where it has done the clone, because the basics is anything that the Jenkins does for a job is it will go to the remote root directory of that machine which it has chosen, and in that directory exactly it is going to run everything. So that way here it has created the workspace now, which is exactly the clone of this, correct? And this is the place where it is trying to say the commit ID comparison. So to see that, if I just open a workspace, now I'm just opening the same thing in so I have opened the same thing on the git bash. Okay, so the latest commit ID that we have here is 192, the same thing, so it should be showing. So this is how Jenkins is actually comparing it with this workspace that it is maintaining with what you have in the central repository. Okay, so you can see this is the same commit ID. Okay, so now what is the point here is we can make use of this particular workspace which Jenkins is used. So ideally now if I want to do a build of this files inside this, simply go back here, and if I type any command, once again, where is it going to run? It is going to run inside the same folder that we are talking about, correct? So we know the concept once again from the first session on Jenkins. If you run any command, it is going to run inside the remote root directory under that whatever the name of the job, it is going to run. So now this is where my workspace is also there. So we are solving that problem also. I don't have to create a separate workspace. Since Jenkins is automatically doing a clone, we can go ahead and run the command. So any command that I run now, it will be directly executed inside it. So obviously, if I run a Maven package command, it will be running it inside this only. So that is how we can directly do the build using the same workspace as what Jenkins is going to give us. Okay, so here if I say Maven package, what it is going to do, it is going to now do the build. So this is what the actual step of build what you're going to do. So now whenever there is a new commit happening here, what Jenkins will do, it will check if the commit ID that you have here is latest when compared to what you have here, then first thing that it will do is it will not just go ahead and build. Now you have a latest commit ID, right? So on this workspace, it will update the workspace first. Okay, so remember this update means if you are doing some new commit ID, it has to take that commit ID and put inside this workspace, that is this workspace, and this is the one Jenkins is using, right? So it will update this, and then whatever the build step that you have given, that will be executed against this. So that is how we are making sure whatever the developer have checked in latest, that you are updating to your workspace and you are running the build. Okay, so that is what exactly it is going to happen. Clear with the process, so that we can see one demo on how it is done. So what we are going to do now, as soon as a new commit is done inside this repository, the next minute when Jenkins is connecting to this, it will see that when compared to its workspace, there is a latest commit that is obtained. So it will first update the workspace with the latest commit ID, and then go back to the job and call whatever the build step, and in that we have given the Maven package. Okay, this is what it is going to do. So now let us try to do some change and push it to the central repository that is available in the GitHub. Okay, so for that, what I'm going to do now is I will create a new workspace. Now don't get confused, be very clear. This is the Jenkins workspace. Okay, I'm just going to keep it apart for some time. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to open a new session. Okay, this is a new screen. Now in this, what I'm going to do is I am under this folder called cvisva-git. So here I will say git clone the name of your central repository, and I will call it as CI demo. So I am creating a new workspace called a CI demo based on this. So what it will do, it will connect with this particular repository, and whatever you have, you can see that you will have a new folder called CI demo. So inside this, you have everything similar to what you have in your central repository. And even in this, you can see if I say git log, you will have the latest commit ID, which is exactly the same as what we have in the central repository. So now, as a developer or a normal user, let us do a commit here, and then we will push it here. So as soon as I push, what will happen? Jenkins will check, and if there is a new commit that is found, it will go to its workspace and update it. Okay, so now both of them are same. Okay, so to modify a file, I have one file called as readme. It is just a dummy file that I've put. If you see the content of this file, it gives me some data. Okay, so let me open this file, and I will change this date to today's date, June 12th. Okay, so what I have done now is I have changed the content of the file from from April 27 to the latest date. Okay, so let me go ahead and do a commit of this first. Test commit for CI demo. Now, because of this, we would have got a new commit ID, and that commit ID is still available in our workspace. Okay, let's see what is the new commit ID it has created. So now you can see it has created a new commit ID, that is 73B4753, and that is not available on your central repository, because only if you do a push it will be available there. Okay, now be very clear, this is our test workspace. As a developer, we have created one workspace and we have done a commit. Neither this is available in the central repository, because if you can see the content, it will still show you the old content, as well as on the Jenkins workspace. This is the Jenkins workspace, right? So if you see in this, even this has the older data, because it is trying to compare with the central repository. So there is no new change, everything is fine. So quickly, now from this developer workspace, if I do a git push, what it will do, it will try to update this commit ID to the central repository, and within the next minute, when Jenkins connects to this and when it finds out new change has been done, then it will come to this particular workspace of the Jenkins, it will update and then call the Maven step and do the build inside it. Okay, so let's try to do this. Okay, it has updated. Let's go back fast and see. So you can see now it got updated. Correspondingly, this file content is updated. And now let's wait for Jenkins, the next run. Okay, now as of now, it has not yet taken, but exactly at the 9:12 at 8 second, it will start the polling. Okay, so another 10 seconds, it will poll. When it polls, what it will do, it will find a new commit ID, and that it will update in this workspace. Okay, so keep watching it exactly at, okay, pretty much now it should be doing it. So you can see now it has triggered, and in that, if you look at the polling here, it will say that there is a new build found, that is new change has been found, because what we have is this, whereas in the central repository this is what it has. So because of it, the first thing that it does is it will update this workspace. So as of now the content is older, right? But now if you see, the content is latest. The same way it would have updated the commit ID also, and then it will go inside the same workspace and it will be executing the Maven build step whatever you have given, and you can see it is running the Maven package step, and because of that it is trying to build the project under your project Jenkins workspace, and here we have created the build. Okay, so this is what we call it as a continuous integration. Like this, for every change a developer does, automatically Jenkins will be connecting for the frequency based on your time, and based on that it will check if there is a new commit happening, then it will update its workspace and then go ahead and do the build. If there is no commit newly done, then it will not do any of this, it will just keep polling on the frequency. So the frequency on how long you have to give, depends on how much time that the build takes. Suppose if the build is going to take 10 minutes, now there is no point for you to keep polling it within less than 10 minutes, because even though there is a new poll, Jenkins will not be able to run a build because one build is running. So unless it completes, it will not be able to run. So we have to give the polling number, the polling time, based on how long it is going to take. Suppose if it is going to take 10 minutes for a job to complete, then you can say the polling time has to be 11 minutes, something more than that, so that when it now triggers, for example, at this time when it triggers, it is going to take complete 10 minutes to finish it, so that exactly when it completes, the next polling that you will do is on 11th minute. This would also have been completed, and then it will go ahead and check for a new poll. Okay, so that is how Jenkins will poll for the data automatically, and this process of continuously integrating this workspace with the new changes of the developer is what we call it as continuous integration. Getting it? Others, is that clear? Okay, so we saw how do we run a continuous integration. There's one more small topic that we will try to take today, and we'll try to stop. So now when you're running Jenkins, you will be having several types of jobs. Sorry. Okay, what I was saying is the job here, the question that comes now is, what is the frequency of polling that you have to run? So what I'm saying is, let's say you are polling the job every 1 minute. Okay. Now, for example, you polled at 9:15. Okay, and you found a new commit ID, and because of that you are going and doing the build. Then when it is running exactly at 9:16, you will again poll, correct? So this happens for every 1 minute. But let's take the build takes 10 minutes to complete. So now, even though every 1 minute you will be polling, you cannot do anything now, because until the next 10 minutes the job is going to complete it. So only at 9:25 the job will be completing. So after that, if you are polling, if there is a new commit ID, then there will be a new build that is going to happen. So that is why the polling period has to be given in such a way that it depends on how long your build is going to take. So give 1 or 2 minutes beyond it. So now here I will give the polling as 11 minutes, because I know the build is going to take 10 minutes. So when I first did the poll at 9:15, the build happened, and then when the build completes, it will be completing it at 9:25. However, the next polling for me happens only at 9:26. So that when you poll, when there is a new commit happened, it will go ahead and do the build, and safely no previous build will be still running. So that is what you mean by giving the duration. So it's all the logic what you give. Clear? Okay. So now, what is that I was trying to say is, so if you go to Jenkins, you will be having many jobs like this created by many users. Now let's take, we have two jobs. Okay, there's job 1, and then you have another job. So now suppose, let's take this is job 1, job 2, Now let's call this as job A, and this is job B. So as a job individually, we know that we will set up a time and we will set where to run and when to run and what task it has to do. So that is completely fine individually. But if we have some kind of dependencies between project, then let's take for project B, it depends on project A. So now, in order to run job B, you need to first run job A and then run job B. So in that kind of scenario, I cannot keep running everything manually, because even though you have set a schedule for this to run, it will still need this to be running it. So that is how, whenever you have such a kind of dependency, then you can set something called as downstream dependency. So what do you mean by downstream dependency? As the name says, down and stream, which means if you can set up a dependency like this for one job to another job, after completing one job, automatically we can trigger another job. So that way, now if I set a downstream dependency from A to B, whenever I run A and when it completes, it will go ahead and run the job B automatically. Okay? But when you are trying to run this way, sometimes, once again, we might have to put a condition on when to run, because if the job is running and if it is failing, then still it will go ahead and run. So that is how you can give certain conditions on when it should be triggering, not just that if you run, you are going to trigger. No, but based on the condition, after the job has completed, and if the condition is matching, then it will go ahead and call this job. So that way you can give condition that has the job completed successfully or is it failed. So depending on what you want to run here, you can set up the dependency. Some example that I can think of is, let's say you are running a continuous integration job, and after running it, if it is successful, then you want to store some information in some kind of database on what it has done. Okay? Or in case if the continuous integration build has failed, then you want to notify some users or the project managers. So that way, depending on your situation or what you need, you can tell whether the condition is successful or failure, and you can give a job name, and based on that, after completing this job A, it will trigger job B only if the condition is matching or satisfied. Okay, so this way of giving the dependency is what we call it as downstream projects or downstream dependency. So to set it up, now let me just take you this simple example. I have first job and I have second job, right? If you go to the second job, it has run only 2 runs, nothing beyond it. So let's try to set a dependency of downstream from first job to second job, where now I will give a condition in first job and say that whenever first job is completed and if the condition is matching, then you call second job automatically from this. Okay, so how do you do that? So to do now, pretty much you have to come to the post build action, because post build means after completing what this job has to do. That is what I mentioned here, right? Not before, but after completing, at the end it should go and call. So that's how, after you have given whatever the build step, it should supposed to go here and then do the action of calling another job. So on the post build action, you can actually specify what is the job that you want to call. Okay, so here you can see an option called build other projects. So if you give this, it will ask what is the name of the job that you want to build after completing this first job. So you give the name of the job, and then what is the condition? The condition is whether this job, that is first job, is completed and it is successful. So that is what we call it as stable. Stable means the job has been completed successfully and there is no issue. So if you want to trigger, then you can choose this option called stable. Suppose if the job is failed and at that situation you want to call the dependency or the second job, then you will say if the job is failing. Okay, but when you say failing, is it failing for the first time or is it failing continuously? So that is what the second option, even if the build is unstable. Unstable means the build is continuously failing or the first job is continuously failing for every run. So depending on your need, you can specify that. So the first condition says only if this job has completed successfully, then you trigger. Okay. So now let's go ahead and do the build. Just some value. So it completed. If you look at this, it did whatever it has to do, but after that, pretty much now it is going to call the second job, where you can see now it triggered it, right? And if you come here, you can see it clearly says that started from the first job, and what was the build number? Build number 15 was the latest one that we triggered, and from that it has triggered this job, and this is what it has run. So that is how after completing this job, and if it is successful, it will go ahead and call it. Okay. Now if I want to change, for example, I'm just going to put a line called exit1. So because of this, the return status of the machine will always be failure. So Jenkins will think that the job failed. It's only for example. So because of this, this condition will not match and the job will not get triggered, or this will never get triggered beyond it. So let me apply this. And if I now run, it's now shows in red color because it failed. Okay, now because of this, you can see it has not triggered the second job, as well as here there is no reference. So only when it is successful at that situation it will trigger. So now if I rerun this, it is successful, and then it is going to call the second job, and equally you will be having a output here. Okay, so this is what we call it as a downstream, so that after you have completed a job, you can call another job based on a condition. Getting it? Is that clear?